cover photosynthesis, make sure you're reading either Chapter 6 in the Owl book or Chapter 6 in the Penguin book. We know that all living things get their energy from the sun. What we may not understand or know is how do we get that energy from the sun into our own body, or how do plants even catch basically the rainbow? So we're going to look at that here in a minute. First, we understand what is an organism that gets energy from the sun versus an organism that gets their energy another way. And plants, since they get their energy from the sun and can make their own energy, convert that energy from the sun into a different form, they are called autotrophs. Auto meaning self, and I always think of troph like food, so they're self-feeders. Heterotrophs, like our cow, can't make their own energy. They can't convert it from the sun into a form that they can use, so they have to get it indirectly from the sun, and they do that by consuming autotrophs. Heterotroph can also be an organism that eats another heterotroph, but basically if you're not a plant or an organism that converts sun rays into a usable form of energy, you're going to be a heterotroph. So what is this process that allows plants to convert the sun's rays to energy? Well, that's photosynthesis. And the conversion is from a light energy to a chemical energy. We're making a molecule, and the molecule we're specifically making is glucose. So think of sugar. We're going from the sun to sugar through the process of photosynthesis. How do they do that? Well, lucky for us, plants and any other photosynthetic organism can catch a rainbow. And they do this because they have specialized structures within their cells that allow them to differentiate the different wavelengths. And that lets them to kind of absorb those wavelengths, and then you harness that energy to do work within their cell. And the way that they can absorb those different wavelengths is through pigments. So a pigment is a compound that can absorb light. It actually takes them from the visible spectrum, the rainbow that we see. Plants, so for example, if something's black, it's absorbing all of the wavelengths. It's like a black hole. It's sucking in, no light's being reflected back to us. White is not absorbing any of the rainbow. It's reflecting all of those colors back to us, and that's why we interpret it as white light. But then if we get into pigmented areas, they're going to absorb or reflect light waves depending upon their pigments. And so, if, for example, here in the center of the shirt, it looks yellow. Well, why is it yellow? Well, because that part of the shirt is absorbing all of the colors of the rainbow except yellow, and it's bouncing that back to us. So our eyes can see it, and it's pigmented yellow. So plants' pigment is something called chlorophyll, and it reflects green. That's why plants look green. They absorb the other colors, especially red and blue, because those are the strongest wavelengths, but they're bouncing back green to us, and that's what our eyes are seeing, and that's why plants look green. But plants aren't silly. They know there's other wavelengths out there, and they want to absorb those as well, so they have accessory pigments called carotenoids. And when I hear carotenoids, I see the word carrot, and I know carrots are orange, and they're catching other wavelengths besides blue and red. They're actually getting a little bit of green, but what they're doing is it makes the plant a little bit more efficient in getting energy. Now, we don't see carotenoids until the fall. That's when the chlorophyll in the plants stop working, and then the carotenoids become visible. And that's why all of a sudden our green leaves turn to yellow or red or orange, because now we can actually see those accessory pigments in the fall. So photosynthesis can be written like this. The plant is taking in carbon dioxide and water and using the sun's energy to make sugar. A waste product of the plant is oxygen, which to us seems a little weird because we need oxygen, so it doesn't seem like a waste to us. But this is the chemical equation for photosynthesis. So my reactants over here, my products over here, these are going into the cells of the plants with some sunlight, and giving us sugar and oxygen. So we're going to break that down and look at how this process actually works. One thing to take into that's interesting to know is the reactants for photosynthesis are the products for cellular respiration. And the products of photosynthesis, we're going to find out when we do cellular respiration, are the reactants. I know, crazy. All right, so photosynthesis can be broken down into two different reactions, light and dark reactions. So we're going to just kind of briefly look at light and a little bit of dark and kind of cover what's going on with those two. So light reactions are called light reactions because they need the sun. There you go. So we're actually taking energy from the sun and we're putting it into a chemical form of energy, which we know as ATP. And we know ATP is an energy force for the cell. We need a little bit of energy to make this whole baking process of making sugars happen. So that's what because that's going to be stage 2, which is actually the dark reactions. We can call it the dark reactions. We can call it the Calvin cycle, but it's the same. They're all the same thing. So Calvin cycle is going to take that ATP from the light reactions and use some hydrogen and carbon dioxide, and they're going to be, this is the part where we're actually going to make our sugar molecules. So let's look at the light reactions. The special structure in plant cells that do all this work are called chloroplasts. And chloroplasts have two little parts inside of them that do the work. One part is the thackyloid, and the other one is the stroma. And the thackyloid look like these little stacks of green coins right here, and the stroma is just kind of the fluid space that fills in between. So light reactions are happening here in the towers. Maybe you can imagine them looking like a battery pack or something, but that's where we're going to be converting solar energy into ATP, right there. So what do I need for light reactions to happen? I need water and sunlight. So the sun's going to beat down on the leaves of the plant right into the cell, striking the thylakoid membrane and kind of getting things excited in there. Water is going to enter into that the chloroplast and go to the thylakoid membrane, and basically there's going to be an enzyme in there that's going to just rip the water molecule apart. It's kind of cool. I always imagine like, oh, hey, what happens when you heat water? It boils. Okay, yeah, we're splitting the water apart. That frees up some hydrogen ions that allow us to do some work. It frees up some electrons to kind of push things along. But basically, at the end of the process, I get the ATP I need, and I get some free hydrogen ions that I can use in the next step. But with that said, because I only want the hydrogen, I'm going to get rid of the oxygen. So oxygen is released, and that's the waste product from this first process. So here's a little bit better diagram. You can kind of see this membrane would be on the thylakoid. You can imagine we got little hydrogen ions being pushed along, some electrons going on, and at the end, I'm getting ATP. But this water is getting broken apart, and out goes the oxygen. So to go back to that, my reactants, sunlight and water, is going to give me ATP and hydrogen ions. I need those products for the next step, which is the dark reactions, which happens in the stroma. Okay, we're now moved into the fluid part of the chloroplast. And remember that dark reactions can be called light-independent reactions. They can be called the Calvin cycle. It's all the same thing. It's all about making sugar. So they're considered dark reactions because I don't need sunlight now. I don't need sunlight because I have that ATP from the light reactions. And it's going to basically let me make my sugar molecule. It's kind of a complicated process. But as long as we know what's going into the process and what's coming out of this process, we're going to be happy. So what's going in? Well, that's the carbon dioxide that plants like to take in, along with the ATP and the hydrogen ions from the light reactions. They're going to give us, at the end of the Calvin cycle, sugar, C6H12O6. And remember, our waste product from light reactions was oxygen. So everything balances out now. Okay? So overall, we have carbon dioxide going in, water going in, and we're getting sugar and oxygen out. You just have to remember that the water and the sunlight allow for us to have the hydrogen ions and the ATP to power the Calvin cycle so that we can end up with the sugar. Oxygen is a waste product. So hopefully that kind of makes things a little bit more clear. And when we get to cellular respiration, you can see exactly how all of these molecules are interplaying with one another and how truly cellular respiration and photosynthesis are interdependent.